Okay, so we're going to talk about the theories of interprofessional collaboration. The framework for interprofessional teams was created to help health and social care teams navigate challenges in their daily practice. Four domains were developed: the relational, processional, organizational, and contextual domains to synthesize the factors that can inhibit or facilitate teamwork. Throughout the presentation, we're going to further discuss each domain and the theories that fall underneath them. So first, the relational domain focuses on factors that affect the relationships that are shared between professionals on a team. Some factors within this domain can include team processes, professional power, team roles, and socialization. An example of the relational domain is an interprofessional team working on a long-term care unit was broken down into two separate subgroups, one with professionals who had more experience and one with junior qualified staff. The team that had increased experience worked together in an equal fashion, discussing and agreeing on patient care, while the group that had less experience depended on a charge nurse to identify their roles. This is just an example of how different hierarchies and team roles can play out on a team. So there was kind of a divide between the amount of experience they had, even though they all were on one team. Some theoretical approaches under the relational domain are the psychodynamic perspectives, social, psychological perspectives, and interactionism. So when looking at the psychodynamic perspectives, it's a micro-range theory, meaning that it has a very narrow scope and focuses on specific contexts and situations. The psychodynamic perspective focuses on the unconscious processes that can play a role in interprofessional work. So one theory under this perspective is the work group mentality theory, and it looks at unconscious processes in teams that are unable to manage their primary tasks. And it states that groups often waste time and avoid making decisions, which increases conflicts and decreases the focus on the primary task. And to go hand in hand with this theory, there's the theory of social defense. And this says that under stressful situations and when conflict arises within groups, the tasks of maintaining the team often overrides the task of maintaining the care of the patient. So when conflict arises, we are kind of losing sight of the main goal of the team. And some psychodynamic processes that emerge in teams are denial, which is when individuals reject viewpoints despite evidence given by other team members. Splitting, so separating good actions from bad or frustrating ones. Projection, which is personal thoughts or emotions being ascribed onto others. And then a last theory under this perspective is Maris's theory of loss and change. And this talks about how individuals often experience emotions of loss when change occurs, leading to unconscious feelings of anxiety. So, this feeling of anxiety could lead to resistance to change in the future, and sometimes change is necessary, whether it's change in your own professional practice or making a change within a team to increase the success and the goals being achieved. If someone is holding themselves back from change, then growth is not able to happen. Next is the social psychological perspectives. Again, this is another micro range theory, so more specific to contexts and situations that might arise. First, they talk about the social identity theory, which is individuals will identify more closely with people from their own group compared to individuals from other groups or social organizations. And along with this, they're going to favor the people in their group more once they're identified as a group member. And then a second theory is the realistic conflict theory. This assumes that groups that hold differing objectives will be more hostile and have more conflict compared to groups that hold common objectives. So you want to make sure on your team you have similar goals for the outcomes of your clients rather than holding different objectives. And then one study used these theories as a framework to look at patterns within interprofessional teams. It was found that there's often hierarchies and stereotypes leading to an increased in profession focused goals, so working on their own profession rather than patient-centered goals during treatment. By using these theories, they were able to identify the need for increased communication and education of other professions. in order to reach common team goals and increase the feeling of worth. So the last perspective in this domain is interactionism, and again, it's a micro-range theory. This looks at the negotiated order perspective, and it says that interaction and negotiation is a core aspect of having an organized team. Negotiation between individuals, such as bargaining and compromising around roles and structures, has been essential to running organizations. So the communication between professions on the team is super important to have an effective team. And then there's the theory of impression management, which focuses on the communication between professions and the importance of that communication. It assumes that communication takes place in both verbal and nonverbal forms, so body language or gestures. And then Goffman has broken down communication into two separate performances. So there's a front stage performance, which is more formal communication, so documentation, or maybe talking to a boss, you might be more formal compared to backstage performances, which are more informal, such as talking to your friends or family, or even a colleague that you might be close with. And he identifies that both types of performances are important, and it's been indicated that backstage communication can help prepare professionals for front stage communication when necessary. So you might be talking to a colleague a lot about a client or intervention plans that you might be completing, and this will help you with front stage performances or more formal performances when they have to occur. So then our next domain is processual. This domain focuses on the work processes that are taken on by an interprofessional team and how these processes may be impacted. So factors within this domain include routines and rituals, time and space, complexity of tasks, task shifting, and informational technology. The theoretical approach under this domain is the activity theory. So this theory is a mid-range theory, meaning it has a broader scope compared to micro-range theories, but still can only be applied to a restricted range of contexts. So for example, it will only be geared towards a larger team with multiple different professions compared to a team where all members might be completing the same task. So, activity theory is a theory that works to explain how social interactions and relationships are affected and influenced by different activities that the individuals on the team are completing. The activity system consists of individuals, objectives, tools, communities, and roles. It looks at how individuals use tools to achieve certain objectives and how the individuals reaching those objectives is shaped by their community around them and rules that may be in place. And then under the activity theory, we look at a theory called not working, which within a team, there's many different professionals working together that has their own thread of activity. And in the picture, it kind of shows a visual of what that might look like. And in the center, the big knot is the common goal of the team. But on the outside, a bunch of the threads are intertwined. They might become untied if a certain profession leaves the team, or there might be increased ties if only two professions are working together. Um, and then an article I found talked about how communication can fail within a team due to many overlapping professions and activities, leading to medical error. So, for example, that might be more geared towards our focus. If we're working on a short-term rehab unit, the main goal that we're going to have, or the knot in the middle, would be to get our client back home. And the OT might be working on ADLs in order to have the person become more independent to be getting home. But in the background, the nurses and might be working with the doctor and seeing things that are prohibiting the client from going home. And then another perspective, the social worker might be focused on moving the client into a long-term care unit. So they all have different activities that they're doing, and unless there's communication and good teamwork each profession is going to be left out and we might not know what is best for the client at that time.
Next, I'm going to be talking about the organizational domain. This explains how structural and environmental factors influence the functioning of a healthcare team or other collaborative groups. So structures in this context is going to refer to how an organization arranges their roles, responsibilities, communication, and authority. Some organizational factors can include leadership, authoritative structures, policies, and communication systems. So kind of a clinical example of the organizational domain is within like a hospital rehab department. The director of rehabilitation oversees the OTs, PTs, and speech therapists and kind of ensures that they're communicating well, following correct procedures, and working collaboratively. And this hierarchy is a form of structure, and it can either have a positive or a negative impact on the functioning of this interdisciplinary team. So essentially, this structure or environment can either inhibit or facilitate the team's ability to work efficiently, their frequency of their errors, and overall patient satisfaction within this setting. And then the theoretical approach that's under the organizational domain is institutional influence. So the institutional influence theory is a mid-range theory. So mid-range theories have a broader scope than micro theories. They look at specific areas within a larger system and often attempt to bridge the gaps between individual behavior and larger societal patterns. So this theory is kind of focusing on how institutions influence interdisciplinary relations and team performance. So institutions in this case are kind of referring to those organizations, structures, and systems in which professionals operate in. So in our context, that would be hospitals, long-term care facilities, schools, etc. And then this theory also acknowledges that over time, institutional pressures encourage the development of common or standardized practices within the organization. So I found an article from the Journal of Interprofessional Care that provided some examples of these standardized or common practices. So these pressures could be like they encourage a team member to share routines or communication methods, protocols, or just approaches to teamwork as a whole. The article also talked about the concept of organizational isomorphism, which is when members of an organization resemble one another, and further explains how that can shape the roles, practices, and behaviors of the team members. So the founders suggest that the following three forces collectively contribute to members of an organization resembling one another. So the first force that they believe is cohesive, which is exerted on the organization from external sources. So that an example of this might be like the rules, laws, or regulations that the government might enforce or regulatory agencies might enforce on the facility. The next force is mimetic, which is in result of organizations imitating their peers as a way of dealing with uncertainty. So an example of this might be a team member who implements something new that is successful, which then leads to another team member wanting to implement that in hopes to have similar success. And then they are not, even though they're not directly required to do that, they see someone else having success with something and they want to implement that in their practice. And then the last force is normative, which comes from the professionals who work within the organizations. So when a group of doctors set standards for team collaboration within a facility, these norms are then encouraged to be adopted by the other professionals. And since these norms were created by people who have great expertise in this profession, they're kind of respected. People are more likely to then want to adopt those habits as well. And then I kind of included this image on the right. It provides like a nice summary of all of these concepts that I just mentioned. It kind of demonstrates how it all interconnects and how it can all contribute to interprofessional collaboration within an organization. The next domain is contextual. So this focuses on the broader environment where interprofessional teamwork takes place. So this domain includes factors related to the social, political, and economic context in which a team functions in. Some examples within these contexts might be gender, diversity, race, culture, political will, and economic status. And then the theoretical approaches that are under this contextual domain, I'm going to talk about further, are professionalization, discourse theory, and surveillance theory. So professionalization is also mid-range theory. So this suggests that occupational groups actively pursue professionalization by engaging in closure. So this concept of closure, it kind of refers to the process of securing exclusive ownership of specific areas of knowledge and expertise. So when professionals guard their knowledge and expertise in order to secure economic reward or status enhancement, this kind of creates interprofessional competition and can cause tension to arise amongst a team. It's kind of why I included that image on the right. So an example could be within our setting is this kind of prestigious ability to diagnose and prescribe. So there's a clear hierarchy within healthcare and social care that physicians tend to be protective over their ability to do this. And when other people are attempting to diagnose or think that someone has something that should be diagnosed, they can get a little guarded regarding that. They want that power. And then this can thus disrupt the interprofessional collaboration. And then a key piece of professionalization is the licensure of professionals, as these grant them the legal authority to practice. So you can't have this sense of closure and this guarding until you have this piece of licensure or have this ability to legally practice on patients. I read a scoping review that concluded that minimal attention has been paid to the issue of professionalization in healthcare management in comparison to other professions. So it kind of demonstrates that professionalization is often overlooked amongst healthcare professionals, which may be inhibiting interprofessional collaboration and just overall efficiency. The next theory I'm going to talk about is discourse theory. So this is a grand theory. So grand theories are non-specific and constructed from relatively abstract concepts. They aim to cover a wide range of topics or events. And in context of health and social care, grand theories are looking at the big picture or trying to explain how members of a team work as a whole rather than individual interactions. So the discourse theory is kind of focusing on the broader impact of social power on interprofessional teamwork. Discourses can be ideas, attitudes, actions, beliefs, and practices that influence how people perceive, think about, and communicate things. So it kind of helps to define a particular culture, including the language and behaviors of individuals who belong to that culture. And then this theory suggests that discourses have the power to define what is accepted as truth and fact. So in the context of a healthcare team, those who create and shape the discourses or these ideas and beliefs within a facility, they have the power. And this can either support or challenge the team's ability to collaborate and function efficiently. Then there's the surveillance theory. So this is also a grand theory. It focuses on how oversight/monitoring within organizations impacts a team's behavior. So surveillance is when team members are unaware of when other professionals, whether that be management, supervisors, the CEO, it could even be peers, are watching their actions. So this provides a sense of psychological power over the team members and often leads to improved compliance with rules and regulations. So surveillance in this theory is kind of seen as another dimension of power, and it's kind of ensuring that individuals are following the rules within a facility. Surveillance is needed in order to maintain discourse. So discourse, which I talked about on the previous slide, those ideas and beliefs, in order to implement those in a facility and make sure that they're staying in check amongst team members, you need surveillance. You need that psychological power that they might be watching you and that you should probably be enforcing those things. And so overall, this theory is kind of describing how oversight mechanisms, accountability systems, and evaluation processes can influence professional behavior within teams. So I included this picture on the right. If you've seen the movie Monsters, Inc., her famous saying is, "I'm always watching." So that's kind of what the surveillance theory is trying to say. And then this is just some resources from the textbook. I pulled this directly from there. Gives kind of like an overall summary of the different domains and the types of theories. Kind of put all the information on one slide. And then this picture is kind of what we use to guide our presentation. It's summarizing basically the domains, the theoretical approaches, the type that they are, and then gives like a short statement on what the theory is about. So there's what we found is that there's very minimal evidence that exists that summarizes and categorizes these theoretical approaches like the textbook does. There's some evidence that looks at the theories individually, but there's not much evidence that is looking at the big picture of how all these theories impact teamwork from a healthcare perspective. So the overall goal of our presentation was to show you how these different theories can impact interprofessional teamwork, both positively and negatively. And then we included some additional resources. So the first one is a YouTube video that kind of provides additional information and background info on the creation of surveillance theory. The next YouTube video is summarizing the common barriers that can arise when working interprofessionally. And many of these barriers kind of overlap with what the theories are talking about. And then the last one is just a journal article. It's based on a study who sent a survey to 933 students who are majoring in healthcare professions in hopes to kind of increase understanding of students' attitudes towards their own and other professional groups. And they actually had a section where they were applying their research to the theoretical approaches, some of them that we discussed. So it's kind of a good article to give you a sense of like connecting the theories to also like real life examples. And then these are our references and our facilitation questions.